Hello folks, my name is Mark and this is Why I Hate the World. How you guys doing? So this was a funny tidbit in the news recently. There was a movie called The Interview, and some hackers broke into Sony and demanded that this movie not be released because it featured the death of the leader of North Korea, which is Kim Jong-un. And they hacked Sony and released a bunch of company emails and things like that. And Sony pulled the movie. And then people lost their minds over that and started calling Sony a bunch of cowards. And even Barack Obama went up on TV and said that was disappointing. So then Sony released it anyway, but not in the major theaters. They released it online and in a bunch of smaller independent theaters. And now the theaters are mad at Sony, saying that, it was Sony's fault and not their fault, and Sony's blaming the theaters. I'm sure there's probably going to be some lawsuits over this. So, anyway, this is why, because I was going to make a video about this a few days ago, and this is why I always like to wait whenever there's a developing story like this, because more stuff happens, First off, people talking who are saying that this is about censorship. This is not really censorship in the technical term. Technically the definition of censorship is that it's usually something that the government enforces. So this is not the United States government, at least. I mean, I guess it's a government, but it's not really, I guess you could say this is self-censorship. The decision to pull the movie from the theaters was self-censorship because the theaters were getting threats or whatever. There was a threat that bad things may happen. So I could see that. But to call them cowards for that, and I don't know if that's really fair. The thing is that movie theaters, if let's say something were to happen, let's say that they did release it in the major chains and there was a bombing or something, and a bunch of people died, there would be, the repercussions from that would be really, really bad. The theaters would be held liable, number one, because they had foreknowledge of it, so it's perfectly understandable why they wouldn't want to release it. So yeah, I mean, there are some people who are saying, oh, they overreacted and all that shit, and they should, grow a sack and stand up to them and all that stuff. Well, yeah. But just imagine that you're United Artists or Pacifica Theaters or something, and, you're potentially facing a lawsuit in the multi-millions, if something, God forbid, were to happen to people at one of your theaters over something like this. I can totally understand why they wouldn't do it. It's just good business why they wouldn't, release it. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I don't know. Some other people are saying that they doubt that North Korea was behind this. I'm not that convinced. I actually think I think they probably were, but I don't know. I mean, until I see some evidence that says they weren't. According to the FBI, they were, but some people out there are saying that North Korea just doesn't have the technical skill. They just don't have the equipment. They don't have the ability to do such a thing. That the internet connection going into North Korea couldn't handle the kind of data that was downloaded or whatever. Well, first off, this is exactly the kind of thing that North Korea does. I mean, because North Korea, they're not just their own citizens. They treat they have like an appalling human rights record, appalling. They'll put people in prison for 4 generations because they're political dissidents, so that means somebody who spoke out against the Ungs or whatever, the Kims back in fucking, the Kims, somebody who spoke out about them, like, back in the 50s and 60s, right, or whenever it is they took over, like, their great-grandchildren are in prison now. Like, seriously, they'll do that. They'll take a guy and they'll throw him in prison, and then his child will grow up in the prison, and that person's child will grow up in the prison for 4 generations, right? And just look this shit up, look up conditions in North Korean prisons. Like, people escape, and they talk about how bad it is there, and, like, that, you know, people are starving and they're beaten daily and they get their legs chopped off and they're like eating horse crap. I mean, it's really like horrible, you know. So that's the kind of country we're dealing with, right? But they've also, you know, North Korea has been known to do things like kidnap people, you know, like kidnap hostages and shit like that. Back in the 70s, they actually kidnapped a Japanese movie director because Kim Jong-il, right, who was Kim Jong-un's father, he actually really likes monster movies, and he kidnapped this Japanese director to go make him a North Korean Godzilla movie. Essentially, it's called Pulgasari, which you can actually you can like get it on the internet, you know, subtitled or whatever, and it's actually not a bad movie, really. But I don't know. Yeah, but you know, like, so they went and they kidnapped this guy and his wife, and they fucking forced him into like make a movie and like shit like that. I mean, you know, North Korea is pretty fucking horrible. Like, it's like the worst place on earth to live. Like, practically, you know, it's like the most repressive fucking government that you can possibly get. So to see that they would do something like this is not like outside the realm of possibility, right? And then the third thing, when people are saying like, well, they don't have the technology, they don't have the technical skill. Well, first, who says that the attack originated inside of North Korea? That's another thing. You know, it's like, oh well, the North Korean internet connection can't handle the data. Well, maybe they weren't in North Korea. You know, maybe they were in China. Maybe maybe they paid somebody to do it somewhere else in the world to go hack Sony. You know, you never know, right? I mean, so it just, I don't know. I don't see, you know, the conspiracy theories actually holding up any water here. You know, basically, I'm going to have to see some evidence that says North Korea didn't do it for me to disbelieve the fact they did, because they have every motive to do it. I mean, because that's another thing people are saying. They're like, you know, well, why would like a government do something like this? You know, because it's kind of ridiculous if you think about it. It's basically like, you know, going crazy, right, over something really small. It's like, well, they're parroting their, you know, it's a parody of like their leader. You know, they're poking fun at their leader, right? I mean, yeah, like, let's say France made a movie where Barack Obama is assassinated, right? You know, it might cause some controversy, right? But would the United States government hack the French movie company? Probably not, right? But that's different because, see, we have a culture which understands freedom of speech, and not just freedom of speech, freedom of dissent, you know, political dissent, right? And even though you're not allowed to make, you know, death threats against the president, it's like if somewhere else in the world does it, it's not like an act of war, right? So the North Korea is different, right? North Korea is run by one family, you know. They've been run by one family for like, you know, 40, 50 years now. I don't know how long exactly, but for a long fucking time. And you know, they have a system called Juche or something like that. I can't remember exactly how to pronounce it. It's like Guche, but I was reading about this shit. It's like Juche, something like that. It's basically like a religion around their fearless leader. You know, like the leader is like God, essentially. You know, like read some of the things. Like go on the internet and look up Kim Jong-il, like the current guy's father, and read about some of the claims they made. Like they say shit like, you know, that this guy like was born under a double rainbow, and then he hit a perfect game of golf, and every time he bowls it's perfect, and he doesn't defecate. That was another one, like shit like that. I mean, it's basically a religion, right? And if you can imagine, just like, so this guy is the old leader's son, who was actually the son of the old leader before him. It's like a monarchy, you know. And imagine that imagine you're Kim Jong-un, right? And your entire life, every time you wanted something, you got it. You know, just imagine that, right? Imagine that every time, even since you were a small child, whenever you wanted something, somebody brought it to you, no matter how ridiculous it is, right? There's a reason why he's fat and everybody else in his country is starving, okay? Like, and imagine what that does to your sense of reality, to just get every fucking thing you want ever without having to earn anything. And knowing that when you grow up, you're going to be the leader of all these people, and you can basically say a word and somebody dies. You know, that might kind of warp your perception a little bit, right? So yeah, it's completely within the realm of possibility, I think, that somebody with that kind of fucking fucked up mentality might take offense right, when he sees a movie where he gets blown up in a helicopter and might order some shit like this to happen. So it's completely, I see he's got the motive, they have the ability, they've got the money at least if they don't have the ability to pay somebody else to do it, right? They're insane enough to fucking do it, and their culture is fucked up enough that the people there probably, like, heard about this and agree with it, I mean, so some other things have happened, like there's been some outages in North Korea, and, they're saying that could be, like, the United States or whatever. I highly fucking doubt that. I really doubt that our government decided to, like, cut the internet in North Korea, but you never know. Probably, maybe they did. Maybe there were some other hackers who decided to get some revenge on North Korea and, basically did a denial of service on them or whatever. Like, apparently there's one connection that goes into the whole country. It can't be that hard to fucking, like, block that connection, right? So who knows? Maybe it was just some, vigilantes, but, probably it was the CIA or whatever. I don't know. And now this is kind of flaming up a little bit of a, like North Korea is saying that this was an act of war and all that shit, and basically everybody else in the world is fucking laughing at them, I don't know. It's just really kind of crazy, and it makes, to see something like this makes me happy to know that I live in the West and that I live in a country where shit like this just never would fucking happen, right? The government here would never go and shut down a movie studio for making a film that, does a parody of our leader, right, of the president, because, and it's just our culture is just, completely against something like that, right? And that's why basically freedom of speech is important, That's why freedom of expression is important. And, when people, like, get up there and they say freedom of speech or whatever, a lot of people talk a lot of crap about how freedom of speech is important. They never really think about what it would be like if you didn't have it, right? North Korea is what it would look like when you don't fucking have it. So, anyway, I think this is a lesson that we can all take, is that, this shit matters, right? Freedom of speech it's the first, it's the first in the Bill of Rights for a reason. Okay, and this is the fucking reason. So, adios, folks.